Okay, so we've been teaching our students all these different skills in their writing. How do we get them to use those skills in their own essays, particularly narrative essays? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Robin Millum, children's book author with Disney Hyperion and HarperCollins. I'm also a middle school teacher. I teach writing. I have a writer's workshop that is student-led, and it focuses on 6 high-priority skills that we learn during workshop time. And workshop time is different from essay writing time, the way I have it set up. It has saved my sanity. It has made my kids much happier. And between those two, our writing program is just soaring. So I want to share this with you all, how I set this up. And in my last video, I talked about vivid imagery being skill number 5. And that particular skill really is a great pivot into one of their first essays that they have to do, which is a narrative essay, something about themselves. In the standard, it says that it could either be real or imagined. So I do allow them to do one or the other. It's up to them. And the way that I do this is, and I want to just pose, a particular idea. What if instead of doing a traditional 5-paragraph essay, what if you tried something called a fun size essay? Perhaps our students could get across all that same information, but in a shorter amount of writing and have it be really punchy. And then from there, later on in the year, you could take these shorter fun size essays and work with them on elaboration. Let's build out this scene a little bit more and kind of build them up to this idea of doing a 5-paragraph essay if that's important to you. So that's the first thing I do. We do fun size essays, basically because they're fun sized and they remind us of candy bars, and all of that together is like a really cool thing. So it's a shorter essay, but you still get the same standard in there. I'll show you how I do it. Then the next thing is, instead of going through kind of like traditional worksheets of like, now we're going to do this and we're going to study what a narrative is and all that, I kind of turn it on its head, and I basically use my previous students' essays as like their mentor text. So I take them and I put them into different strips, and we deconstruct an essay, and they try and match it up to the different sections of the essay and see if they can figure that out. I have one on my screen that I will show you of one of my students and how we would use a narrative to deconstruct it. The vivid imagery skills, that really is perfect for a narrative essay. They are able to pick these specific nouns. They are picking really strong verbs and leveled up adjectives. Perfect for narrative writing. So I have found a way to make this in smaller chunks. It's something that right now I'm teaching 6th grade. Last year I was doing 8th grade. My 8th graders needed this too. They needed it broken up into smaller little pieces. So this is something that they are able to do, and we could get this done in a 10-day block. We are not doing 4-week, 5-week, 6-week, 9-week essays. Okay, I'm just not going to talk about that, but I don't think we should be doing 9-week essays. I get mine done in 10 days. And then in my other videos, I talk about the value of a student-led writer's workshop is that at the end of those 10 days, the rest of your class can now move on into their writer's workshop, into the next skill, and you can pull back any of the students who are really struggling and work with them through this essay. It's like the perfect thing to be able to do differentiation and get your kids who are ready to move on soaring, and they're moving on to the next thing. So I'm going to go to my screen and I'm going to show you how I teach a narrative essay. Okay, so this is how I teach narrative writing. We start talking about how narratives are stories that we want people to know about ourselves or our characters, and how we can actually do this in a way that's smaller than they even think. It can be done in a small way, 6 steps, maybe even 6 sentences. It's totally possible. So when I go through this, I do like a an overall view first. I don't just jump in and say, okay, here's your hook, here's a definition, now try and write one. I back out, we kind of go through the whole thing, look at the examples, work with the example, and then come back in here. So I'm reading it through to them, like what the hook is, the next part about how they set the scene of their story and the importance of that. Then what's the goal? If you've ever done that thing called Somebody Wanted But So Then, if you haven't seen that, go look that up. It's a great way to summarize a story. And it's the same way that you would summarize your own narrative story. So what is it that you want? And then you move on to, there's a problem. So there's a conflict. What happened? What got in your way? And then how did it get resolved? What did you do? What did somebody else do? What happened to kind of fix the situation or not fix it, depending on what happened? And then, so what? What happened? What lesson did you learn from that? If it was a fortune cookie, what would your fortune cookie say about this experience? So then we kind of back out and we talk about looking at an example of one, because I want them to see this. So I choose one of my own students' essays from a previous year and then put it in here and show them the hook, the scene, the goal. This one was about her little kitten who got sick the day that they brought the cat home. Super sad. And then what happened to it, and it gets kind of worrisome, like what's going to happen to this cat. And then we're scared, and then it all kind of works out in the end. So we talk about that. And then what I would do from here is talk about the emotions that are connected to that particular essay that student wrote. What was that student feeling when that happened to them in their lives? And then think about other emotions. So maybe they were fearful, worried, scared. And then what other emotions do we have? And start just listing off a whole bunch of different emotions. And I would kind of leave it at that for a minute, so that we know that our narratives are going to be dealing with a time that we felt some sort of emotion. And then I would hop back out and do something that I called deconstruct an essay. So that essay that they just read and that we just went through, I cut it up into strips. Let me pop up here. Okay, I'm going to come back to this part here real quick because that's super important, but I'm going to go down here. It is here, deconstruct your narrative essay. So you cut it up into strips like this, and it has the different sections now with the terminology that I want them to learn and know. Yours might be a little different, but this is what I use when I do a narrative. So they have all these different cards, and then that particular essay is into strips, and you give them to a group of 4 or 5 kids or 3 kids. I like groups of 3. And they try and, based on their memory, put this back into order. And that helps with going from listening to it and seeing it and then to moving it around with their hands. It helps them to remember the concepts and try and see if they can get it on the first time. Now, later, I would do this again and again. So I'd pick out at least 2 more student essays, and either later on in that lesson or the next morning, next day, do another one of these. Cut out the strips, have them put it back together again, do it again. So they see, put all the examples up with those category headers on them so that they see 3 different examples of a narrative broken down into these 6 steps. So it's always up there. So then once you've kind of manipulated it and worked around with it, what I would do is go back up here, and I'm sorry for making you dizzy, but I would have them start to write. So let's go back up here. Let's go back to the emotion one right here, where we've talked about all these different emotions. And you can either do this whole group and you're writing on it. Maybe they're writing in their own notebook or something, their composition book. I'm just a big fan of using composition books and having the kids make their notes their own. Even doing sketch notes. I love teaching sketch notes at the beginning of the year so that they highlight and color and underline all the important stuff. So they've written down this whole list of emotions. Now they need to pick one. And they pick this one emotion, and then they come up with 3 times in their life when they felt that emotion. So let's say they felt surprise. What were 3 times that they were surprised? They were surprised by a birthday, surprised by a person who did something that was unusual, anything with that emotion. And then from there, they pick that particular event and start writing. So then this would take them back to that very beginning one, and they would start writing their own hook and so on and down there. Now, here's the one thing I wanted to show you real quick. Let's look at the example. So if I copy and pasted the example, it would look like this. And it's a really good hearty paragraph. It's a good paragraph. But what I want to show them is that you can have some artistic style with your writing, not just in the words that you choose, but the way that you space out your paragraphs. And I feel like we don't actually talk about this enough with our students, how you can emphasize certain things just with how it looks on the page. So let's suppose I took this same paragraph and then this time I made it look like this. Sometimes there's a paragraph with only one sentence in it. And when you're doing this style of writing, once they understand the mode of writing and who's going to read it and how you can have a different style, it's not a formal essay. This is a narrative story. You can have a one sentence paragraph. So I kind of picked out the ones that were super important, but then something scary happened. That can be all on its own. So just giving it some space and some breathing a little bit in between the words there, it breaks it up. And then look how huge that essay now looks. So they did it in 6 steps, but they've actually written like a really good solid essay. And then later on in the year, you could have them go in and do some, like pull out another narrative that they've done, elaborate, pick out the nouns, pick out your verbs, strengthen it as you go. But you got to get them doing the steps in the first place. So that's why I break it down into really small chunks at the beginning. And then you keep layering and layering and layering through the year until they are jamming when it comes to next spring. So that is how I teach narrative writing. It is a perfect pairing with my vivid imagery student guides that I have. I'm going to leave links below to that as well. Because if you teach the two in tandem, it's really strong. They really start to get it. I have some free things down below as well. If you would like to have a copy of my entire introduction to my ebook about how I run a student-led workshop and get my kids writing like crazy and having all the confidence that they need when we start doing these essays. There's a link below, so check that out. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.